Let's start by looking at this shape to figure out how we're going to construct it. First, we see some repeated and aligned rectangles, which we know how to make with dragging and copying using the alignment guides as we're creating the rectangles. We also see this stripe through the center, and the way to get this, well, first we can tell that it's not just created triangles because we've got a little bit of extra at this corner, so we can tell that something has been subtracted out of the rectangle. So we're going to take a little stripe, subtract it from background rectangles. We also have a copy over here on the right, basically of what we have on the left, but rotated. And the thing is, we know that we're going to take this stripe out last because of the fact that it would be really hard to take the stripe out in a spot where we could rotate the copy and have these things be perfectly aligned, both in angle and alignment right as we go here. So that gives us our order of operations. We're going to create the rectangles, we're going to make the copy, rotate it, and then we're going to do this stripe subtraction, and we'll talk about some issues involved with that as we go. So let's go over to our blank document. Start with, I'm going to pick the rectangle tool. Let's make our small rectangles. We'll just make one of these, switch to the regular black selection tool, holding down Option on the Mac, Alt on the PC to make a copy as I drag. And I'm just going to do this twice again with Object Transform again, which is Command D or Control D on the PC. Now, I could have done a couple of these things in a different order. I'm just going to create the bigger rectangle underneath using the construction guides you see that show up in magenta. And I'm going to just drag another copy over here to create the other one. I could have done this in a different order and created a second copy of these. Well, I'm just going to do it this way. So now I've got my rectangles. I want this right-hand one to be a rotated version, so I'm going to drag over all three of these to select them all at once, hover over outside of the control points on the corner. As I rotate it, I'm going to hold down Shift to constrain the rotation to a nice flat so I know it's straight. All right, so I've got a good starting point here for my background shapes. Now I need to do the subtraction of the rectangle from these two big corner rectangles. I'm going to go ahead and make my skinny rectangle exactly the same size as this gap just for fun. And then I'm going to rotate it around, I'm going to rotate it around so it touches the corner here, and then this part's a little fiddly. I'm sure there's ways I could construct this such that I am doing it more precisely, but I'm just going to do this by eye and kind of get it so that it's pretty close and touching both those corners, and then I'm just going to use the arrow key to nudge that up a little bit so that that's hitting the corners. All right, so that's close enough for what I want to do here. I'm going to rotate that just a tiny bit around. All right, so now I want to subtract this front piece from the two background ones. I can do any individual subtractions by highlighting two shapes. So here I've got hit Shift and click on both. I can go over to the Pathfinder palette. The second one in is called minus front. So you click on that and it takes the shape that's in the front of the other one, subtracts it from the background one, we get our stripe. But as we said, we want to do these both at once. So I'm going to hit undo, get this back. There's a complication here though, because we want to subtract it from both at once. If we just hold down Shift and select both of those, hold down the front one, or sorry, hit Shift and select the skinny rectangle in the front, and I hit minus front, it's actually going to, select all of those, or I could drag through the center and select all of them. If I hit minus front, it does something weird. It like takes the frontmost object and kind of the front ones and subtracts from the back one, and that's not right. Okay, I could try to group these. So I select both the background rectangles and I right click and go to group. So now those rectangles are one object. I hit shift, select that skinny one in the front. The same thing happens. So it's not considering those background objects to be a single object. For whatever reason, the way this minus front works, it works fine if your multiple objects are in the front. It takes all of them everything that's in the front and subtracts it from the back. So if I'm going to ungroup this, so I've got individual rectangles again. If I select those and I move those to the front, arrange, bring to front. So now if I select the skinny one and those two front ones and I say minus front, it'll do what we expect. But that's not what we have. We have them in the background. So if you have multiple objects in the background and you want to subtract the thing in the front, your only option is to create what they call a compound shape. So it's kind of like a grouped objects, but it's considered one shape that just has gaps in it or can have gaps in it. So I'm going to right click and say make compound path. Okay, that's like anything that has a hole in it, like a lowercase a that has the counter in it that has a circle, that's a compound path. Now if I hit shift here, shift again, select all those objects and I say subtract front, now it treats the background objects all as one and I get rid of that slice all at once. Okay, now the strange thing is that those, even though I created a compound path to do the subtraction, after the pathfinder operation, now it's considered a grouped object. So if I click on it and I right click and I can say ungroup, now these are individual objects and I can color them together. So I'm not going to do exactly the same colors, but let's do something like we had in the other example. I'm going to recolor these. Let's say those are orange, and then I'm going to color those together the same, a darker orange. Now the last piece that I have here is I've got hollows inside of the rectangles on the corners. Okay, let's get rid of all of the strokes for now. And what I'm going to do is I could subtract out some rectangles from these and just put holes in here, but instead I'm going to do a stroke and have it not stick out the outside. So let's see what we have here. What I want to do on these shapes, I've just selected the corners, and I'm going to swap their fill and stroke, which you can see Shift X is the shortcut for that. Now the stroke is really thin, so I'm going to bump that up so it's nice and thick. Now the problem that you'll notice is that the stroke is centered on the path, so it sticks out outside of here. The last thing I'm going to show you, if we select both of these, we have options over in the stroke palette where it says align stroke. The default is that the stroke is aligned to the center. We have another option that it says align stroke to inside, and that puts the stroke inside of the bounds of the path. And now we have something close to what our example was.